Welcome to class number 4 of our 2026 virtual HOA Condo Academy. We teach these classes in partnership with the cities of Avondale, Chandler, Glendale, Goodyear, Mesa, Peoria, Phoenix, Scottsdale, Surprise, and Tempe. My name is Beth Mulcahy, and I'm the founder and senior partner of the Mulcahy Law Firm in Phoenix, Arizona. I'll be your presenter today. And we're going to be talking about ethics, accountability, and fraud prevention for HOA and condo boards. Our firm currently represents over 1,000 planned communities and condominium associations throughout the state of Arizona. And I also currently serve on my HOA board and have for many years. In fact, I just left my HOA board meeting right now to come over to start this class. In this class, we'll cover the core principles of board member ethics and fiduciary duties. We're going to explore some real-world dilemmas and give you some examples of different situations that have come up that address ethics and conflicts of interest and what our fiduciary duties are to the associations. We're going to talk a little bit about how using a strong code of conduct can be helpful to prevent conflicts and ensure that people are abiding by their fiduciary duties when they're serving on the board. And we're also going to look at some steps to identify and address unethical behavior, along with some proven strategies to protect your association's funds from fraud and embezzlement, which is a very scary but very hot topic right now in our industry. What we want to do is have you walk away with the best practices for your community to promote transparency, accountability, following your fiduciary responsibilities to the association, and having members of your community having confidence in the board's leadership. In addition, I just wanted to let you know that many of the participating cities' neighborhood services and community engagement offices offer a lot of valuable information for board members and owners, and including information on grants. The grant reset typically will start July 1st, so really a great time to look into the grants that each one of your respective cities, towns, or municipalities offers for HOAs. And get your application ready, because if you submit it right on July 1st when it opens, you'll be first in line to get the grant money. Some other things that neighborhood service departments and community engagement offices in the cities that we teach the classes with help associations with is enhancement and beautification projects, and also some various community building endeavors. We strongly encourage you to reach out to connect with your neighborhoods or community engagement team for your respective cities in this new year to inquire about what different offerings they have. I know that a number of the different communities have really great information on short-term rentals and how to handle difficulties with short-term rentals, in addition to the grants and code violation and a lot of the other things that cities provide for associations. Whether you're a board member or whether you're an owner in the association. Okay, here's how our class is going to go today. We're going to do the topic that we have for today, and then we're going to end with question and answer. And I'll conclude the main presentation, hopefully right around noon, and we'll move right into questions at that time. Due to the large number of attendees we have here today, please note that there's only one question per attendee. And if you're joining us on Zoom, please be sure to submit your question in the Q&A box. And if you're joining us on Facebook Live, please type your question in the comment section and we'll be sure to answer it today. Okay, let's do a poll so I know who's here today in attendance with us. I'd like to start off by just getting a feel for which city that you reside in first, which city is your HOA or condo in, and then also what is your role with the association. So if you are joining us on Zoom, this question is in the poll format on your screen. Please respond so that we can tailor this class as best possible as for you today. If you're joining us on Facebook Live, just let us know which city your HOA or condo is in and what your role is with the association, whether you're an owner, board member, manager, etc. Okay, while we are waiting for the poll results to come in, I want to talk a little bit about the Arizona legislature. So as many of you know who have been attending our classes since January 1st this year, the Arizona legislature is in session. We are a seasonal legislature, and typically the legislature or the legislative session in Arizona will run from, like the second week in January Usually, the past few years, it's run until the end of June. One year during the pandemic in 2020, it ended like a really short session. It ended in like late March or early April. But most years, it's about 5.5 to 6 months. So as always, our firm has been closely monitoring the HOA and condo bills that pertain to associations. And on our website at mulcahylawfirm.com, we have a pending bills summary that we are updating every week to provide you with information about what the bill says and where it is in the process. So remember, for a bill to become law in Arizona, we have to have it pass the House and pass the Senate with the same language, and then it has to go to our governor, who would have to sign the bill into law. And so right now we're kind of at the critical juncture where really like the next month, we should have a lot of clarity about which bills are going to pass this year and which ones aren't. A lot of bills were introduced this year, over 30, and we're watching to see if the governor signs any of them in the next few weeks. Now, remember, the legislative session doesn't end until the budget is approved for the state of Arizona. So typically what happens is there's kind of like a mad dash right now the next few weeks, and the legislature is going to kind of approve a majority of the bills that are going to be given to the governor this year for determination whether or not she'll sign it. And then there'll be kind of a heavy budget discussion for 3 weeks, sometimes 4 weeks. And then maybe like 1-2 days after the budget passes, where maybe a couple other bills that trickle in will pass. But the majority of the bills that are going to pass, in my experience, are going to be passing in the next few weeks. So stay tuned. We talk about the new legislation and what bills are, where they are in the process, and what bills, when they pass, we let you know right away through these classes. So make sure that you're joining us for First Fridays, the first Friday of the month, and then also for these neighborhood services virtual HOA academies over the next 2 months, because it'll be very important to find out what bills pass this year and when they'll be going into effect. One thing that I just wanted to mention, there are a couple of bills that indirectly impact associations that have been signed by the governor. There was one bill that I was looking at yesterday about recording. Like if you're recording, it's kind of like to prevent fraud. That people are recording false warranty deeds. And now if you're recording something, you have to provide, a picture ID. And it does not apply to attorneys, so we can continue to record things as normal. There also are some additional notary requirements, some additional thumbprints that we have to get when we notarize documents. For if we have a notary public in our firm, and for notary publics, which kind of, minimally impacts the association. It's not like a direct bill that is, in the Plain Communities Act or the Condominium Act. There also was a bill on assisted living homes that I think could impact associations. And we'll be talking more about the bills that passed this year at our June virtual HOA Academy, the third Tuesday in June. But this assisted living bill I thought was kind of interesting. It's Senate Bill 1473. And it was just signed by the governor on April 7th. How it may impact associations is because it's going to eliminate certain local government barriers to small assisted living homes, which would be like 10 or fewer residents, and make it easier for those homes to operate in residential neighborhoods. So as a result, of this bill, we do anticipate that there will be, an increase in the number of smaller assisted living homes within HOAs and condominium communities. This bill won't in any way impact our ability as an association to enforce CC&Rs, including restrictions that would be related to parking, noise, or other nuisance type issues that might arise with any owner, including assisted living homes. But it's just kind of an interesting bill in that, previously the cities, towns, counties had some ordinances that were, limiting how many assisted living homes could be in a certain area. And now some of those restrictions are being lifted. So it's going to potentially make it easier for our assisted living homes to operate in residential neighborhoods going forward. So something to keep an eye on. In my experience, assisted living homes there aren't a lot of problems related to them. from a legal perspective. Usually, you don't even know that it's an assisted living home, and there's not a lot of traffic, which is kind of sad because not a lot of people are coming to visit the people in the assisted living homes. But so just we have to balance, what the new law says with how we can advise our clients on how to best manage assisted living homes, which are protected, as you probably know, under the Fair Housing Act. So as long as it falls under the categories of the Fair Housing Act, we can't do anything to prohibit them from being in HOAs, which is typically where they would be. Okay, let's talk a little bit about our poll results. Let's see if I've got them here. Perfect, you guys already. My team is amazing. Thank you very much, Alexis and Holly, for being so on top of things. So we have a really great turnout today. Every single city that is in conjunction with our firm teaching these classes is represented here today. Avondale has 2%, Chandler 5%, Glendale 3%, Goodyear 3%. Mesa is winning today with 38%. Peoria, 4%, Phoenix, 14%, Scottsdale, 15%, Surprise, 8%, and Tempe, 7%. So great turnout today from all of the cities. Thank you for being here today. And then the next question is, we have 104 out of 104. Wow, total participation. Thank you guys for doing that today. Current roll for people that are in attendance here today, 68% are board members, 2% are managers, 23% are interested homeowners, and 7% are in the other category. So great turnout. We have a heavier board participation today, which based upon the topic, I think is probably, not surprising to me. So let's get into our topic for today. Looks like we're going to be talking about ethics first, and how to define ethics for an HOA board. So when someone is elected to an HOA or a condo board, it's oftentimes you don't really realize what you're getting yourself into. Even myself, as somebody who has been representing associations for 30 years now, or almost 30 years in November, when I was elected to my board, I honestly didn't really fully understand the time commitment and the ethical minefields and all the responsibilities and obligations that entailed being a volunteer board member in an HOA or a condominium. And so one thing I want to do is just kind of go over what are some, key principles today that you should be thinking about as a board member to keep you out of trouble, and to make sure that you're, conducting yourself in an ethical manner, and that your board is conducting itself in an ethical manner, that you're living up to your fiduciary responsibilities. So first, let's talk a little bit about fiduciary duty just generally, and then we'll get into it specifically. The board, when you're elected to your board, you have a fiduciary duty, which is set up under Arizona law and the Nonprofit Corporation Act. And what this duty is it's really a legal duty to act in the best interests of the community as a whole when you're making decisions. And you shouldn't be thinking about me, what's best for me. Now you should be thinking what's best for the community or the association. And there are going to be times when this, comes into, it to be a challenging situation for you as a board member. And I can give you some examples of this, but in practice, this just involves making sound, informed decisions on behalf of the association and its members. And remembering to keep in the back of your mind that while I may not personally agree with this decision as a board member, I got outvoted and the majority of the board wants to proceed forward down this particular path. And sometimes when you're making decisions, you have to kind of put your personal interests aside and think about what's best for the community. And I have lots of examples of this. Like one really good one, I think, just to start off would be, let's say that your association has a lot of deferred maintenance over the years, and maybe your association has never raised its assessment in like 8 or 9 years, which is a bad thing, by the way. Really, you should be doing cost of living increases on your assessment every year, because all of the things that you're paying for are doing cost of living adjustments. And if you don't adjust with that, what's going to happen is you're going to have less money and more expenses, and you're going to end up with deferred maintenance. So let's say that your association has a lot of issues that have been neglected, maintenance issues that have been neglected over the years. And now your association needs to do a big $3,500 special assessment against all the owners because, basically the county shut down your pool, the roof is caving in your clubhouse, all the paint is chipping, and you're getting feedback from owners that they can't sell their homes because, common areas are in such disrepair. Maybe that's your fact pattern. And maybe as a board member, you're sitting at that table and maybe you're retired and on a fixed income, and a $3,500 special assessment, you can't do it because you have a fixed income and that's not something you plan for. But on the flip side, hey, this is like really necessary for our association. Our tennis court is chained shut. The county shut down our pool because we don't have the proper drains that, should have been installed pursuant to the county code. And the community's falling apart. And so you're like balancing this as a board member, right? Like, oh, I don't have $3,500 to pay the special assessment, but the community really needs this, or else the property values are going to go down, or we're going to get sued by owners for not maintaining the property. And this is like a really good ethical dilemma for board members because it's your personal interests versus the interests of the association. And so I think what you need to remember is when you're making decisions as a board member, you need to put the community first. And, in that circumstance, you need to, vote in favor of the special assessment because your community needs that. Now, that being said, I think you can also bring an interesting perspective to the board in that you can say, hey, there may be some residents, myself included, let's say, that I don't have $3,500 to do this special assessment. So can we set up payment plan? Maybe make it due on July 1st, and you'll have to follow whatever the procedures are in your association documents to levy a special assessment. Usually it's going to require a homeowner vote. But let's say that vote passes. Now the board proposes it, the vote passes it. Maybe you can give feedback to the board like, hey, let's make it due in full July 1st. But if owners can't do that, let's give them 12 months to pay it off if you can figure it out so that works. Or maybe let's provide a lender who can give advice on HELOCs, equity loan that you might be able to borrow against equity in your property. And, give some different options for owners that might not be able to make that $3,500 payment and use your personal situation in a way that still benefits the community, but also help people that might not be able to pay the special assessment. So point on that is, remember, you have to put the interests of the association when you're serving on the board ahead of your personal interests. Ethics and fiduciary duty really go kind of hand in hand. What does ethical conduct mean? It means acting with honesty, acting with fairness, and with integrity while following the association's governing documents and applicable laws. So because board members represent the community, maintaining high ethical standards is essential to effective leadership. And we're going to kind of get into some examples of unethical behavior that I've seen either by management companies or by board members over the years. And what are some tips that we can do to really avoid that so that doesn't happen? Okay, let's talk about what are some key principles for board member ethics. At the core of ethical, duties by HOA and condo boards are, the fiduciary duty, which is set up by the Nonprofit Corporation Act in Arizona. And most associations are nonprofit corporations. So this would apply to, 99% of the associations in Arizona, whether you're a planned community or a condominium. You're typically also set up as a nonprofit corporation, and the Nonprofit Corporation Act applies to you. Okay, so what are the three foundational duties that you need to be aware of? The first one is the duty of care. So when you're acting as a board member, you have to act, in a way that shows that you care about the decision that you're making, investigation, etc. We'll come up with some examples on this in a minute. So duty of care, number one. Number two, duty of loyalty, which means that board members can't profit from serving on the board, or they can't self-deal, or they shouldn't be hiring their son to be, the landscaper for the association. And then the third duty is the duty of confidentiality. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But basically, it's what you hear in executive session cannot be discussed with anybody other than your board members, the manager, and your association's legal counsel. So together, these three duties, the duty of care, duty of loyalty, and the duty of confidentiality, ensure that the board acts in a manner that's thoughtful in your decision making, that you're honest in your business dealings as a board member, and that you're acting in the best interest of the community and not disclosing confidential information to third parties. So let's just kind of break it down and talk a little bit about the duty of care and give you some examples of how this, the first duty under the fiduciary duties may come into play for you as a board member or if you're a homeowner watching the actions of your board. So duty of care means that you need to act in good faith in all of your board activities. So make informed decisions based upon reasonable inquiry, right? So if you're going to do a repainting project in your association, you're going to want to get at least three bids, right, from vendors for the painting contract. You're going to want to check with the Register of Contractors to see if there are any complaints against the vendor. You're going to want to check references, maybe go look at the work product that the painter did in another association that's similar to yours. So you're making a decision to hire a vendor after reasonable inquiry and enough information so that you're making a good decision for your community. Another duty of care is just understand your governing documents and whatever rules and regulations that you may have for your community. By understanding the governing documents, I don't mean that you have to know them forwards, backwards, inside out. What I ask you to do as a board member is to do a 15-minute spin through the documents, which would be like the CC&Rs or the declaration, the bylaws, the articles, and the rules, 15 minutes a year. Just get the lay of the land, page through it, and look at, okay, the CC&Rs are setting up the insurance requirements, what we have to maintain, what the homeowners have to maintain, assessments, special assessments, use restrictions on the property, and maybe the bylaws or how to run the association. And you just know that if there's a question about when the annual meeting is or how many board members you have, that's going to be in the bylaws. And then maybe the rules are going to be just how people are, required to act on the common areas, or maybe you have more broad rulemaking authority and there might be additional, restrictions in the rules based on that. And so just understanding that these documents exist, we are responsible for upholding them. If there's something in the documents that we don't agree with or that the community is not in favor of having anymore, what's the procedure? You amend the documents. You don't just blow off and not look at the documents and say, we're not following that. The proper procedure is amend the document to take it out. A couple other things I want to talk about: the duty of care. Reach out to your trusted advisors when you're making decisions as a board, especially complicated or difficult decisions. Your trusted advisors are going to be your management company, your legal counsel, your insurance agent, your reserve specialist, your landscaping company, maybe your pool company that serves as your pool, and ask them for advice. I see myself as legal counsel for over 1,000 associations as part of your team. I'm trying to advise you so that you make good decisions and stay out of legal trouble. Our firm, every day, there's a person on my team who looks at the cases that are filed in all of the courts in Arizona for the prior day. There's a service that we subscribe to, and we get a listing of all the cases filed, lawsuits filed in Arizona each day. And my goal as your legal counsel is to make sure that none of my clients are on that list, right? I want you to avoid being sued. I don't want you to get involved in messy legal entanglements where you're going to be spending $200,000 or $250,000 in legal fees that you haven't budgeted for. And, it's just not smart decision making. So talk to your trusted advisors, make sure you're aligned with, what their values are, and work with them to ensure that you're exercising sound judgment and you're making good decisions. And when you make a mistake, you admit it and you fix it and you say, I'm sorry. I was reading a case last night an Arizona case where an association made an initial mistake. This is a case that was in the Court of Appeals, and it's a couple of years back. I think it was, maybe like 2011 or something. And I was using it for a project that I was working on. And I was just kind of reading the case, and the facts were so bad for this association. Like, they made a mistake. Okay. And instead of correcting the mistake, what they did is they just continued to let it get bigger and bigger and bigger and snowballed out of control, to the point where, the court just said, like, you are wrong and you lose on every issue. And then, it gets even worse. Then the association appealed it, and took it to the next higher court level and spent more money fighting for something that was just wrong to begin with in the first place. So just to get back to exercising sound judgment and prudent decision-making, make sure that you're aligned with your trusted advisors and that all of you have the same goals and objectives. My goal as your legal counsel is to give you the best possible legal advice to keep you out of trouble. And when you have a problem, to be a strategy partner with you to help you manage the problem and manage the risk and eliminate the problem ultimately, and to help you be successful in moving forward with your responsibilities to the community, which are, maintaining the common areas and upgrading amenities, and not get you bogged down with 500-pound weights of lawsuits and fighting with everybody. So make sure that you're aligned as a board with your vendors, and that will set you up for having success. So that's the first fiduciary duty that we kind of spend a lot of time on. That's kind of the most important one, in my opinion. So first duty of the fiduciary duties is the duty of care. The second one we're going to talk about is kind of easy. It's the duty of loyalty. Basically, you have to act in the best interest of the organization. You can't do anything, make decisions that are going to harm the association. You need to disclose any conflicts of interest you have. So, for example, if, you maybe have a relationship with a vendor that's from another community, like let's say you own properties in two communities, and maybe you really like the landscaping job that this landscaping company is doing in this one community, and you want to bring them over to your second community, it's sound business judgment and loyalty to the corporation would require you to say, hey, this is how I'm aware of this vendor. And I'm not, getting any sort of kickback for referring them here. I just know that they do a great job. You're welcome to go over and look at ABC Association, look at their work product. I'd like to have them come here and give a bid. Be very careful as a board member that there sometimes can be a temptation that, if you're on the board, the management company, the landscaper, a lot of the key individuals that are maintaining the association, be very careful to not ask them, hey, landscaper, can you come over on my property and, trim my tree, which is my responsibility at no charge, wink, wink. Stay away from that. That is going to get you into trouble as a board member. So remember, when you're serving on your board, you have a duty of loyalty to the corporation. You have to act in what's best interest for the corporation. You should be avoiding any conflicts of interest where, like, you want to hire your son or hire, a family member to work for the association. That's a very bad idea. Don't do that. Remember that you shouldn't be financially gaining from any service of the board. Like, you shouldn't be getting things for free. You shouldn't be getting free service. You shouldn't be getting kickbacks for hiring vendors. All of these are important facets of the second fiduciary duty, which is the duty of loyalty to the corporation. Okay, the last duty is the duty of confidentiality. This is kind of an interesting one. Basically, you need to keep information that you hear in executive session confidential. So executive session, just as a reminder, is the time where you as a board are meeting to discuss only 5 different subjects that you're allowed to discuss under Arizona law. And you have a special notice for the executive session. You have to give an agenda for the executive session. It won't be detailed, obviously. And you have to list the section under Arizona law that is going to be discussed, which part of the executive session law is going to be discussed in the executive session. And you have to stay limited to those topics. So as a board member, what I always tell my clients is when you serve on the board, and you don't realize this when you're not on the board. Once you get on the board, you're like, oh, I wish I didn't know that. So you get on the board, you go into executive session, and you get the juicy scoop on everything, right? You're hearing about, domestic relations problems between owners in your community. You're hearing about owners not being able to pay their assessments because they're going through financial difficulty. You're hearing about bankruptcies that owners are filing. And really, there's all kinds of things. You're hearing about maybe families that may have a family member that has dementia, and that person is maybe having some behavioral issues, and that's trickling down, and our security personnel is, notifying us of it. So it's like the juicy scoop of all the confidential information for your association. Now, your duty of confidentiality means that anything you hear about in executive session, you cannot talk about with anybody other than board members, your manager, or your attorney. So no pickleball partners, no doubles tennis partners, no mahjong group, no walking club group. None of those people are part of any of that juicy scoop that you hear in executive session. You cannot discuss it with them. You cannot tell them about it, or that would be a breach of your fiduciary duties to the corporation under your duty of confidentiality. So just quick refresher. This is truly one of the most important classes I think we teach all year. This fiduciary duty concept is really the core of your responsibilities as a board member. So don't forget, as a reminder, every decision that you make, you should be making it in the best interests of the association. Remember, you have a duty of care, a duty of loyalty, and a duty of confidentiality as your three primary duties as a board member for your community. Okay, let's switch gears and talk a little bit about some common ethical dilemmas. I think we've already kind of touched on a few. We're going to be sharing a document with you, an article that was written about code of conducts, and we also have a cheat sheet on code of conducts. Ethical challenges for associations come up all the time. It's surprising. It's almost like I always kind of laugh and say, sometimes serving on the board is like living a bar exam, because they give you all these different fact patterns, and there's a lot of issues there, and a lot of them have ethical issues and implications, and we have to be really careful as board members because it's like a minefield of problems. So we talked about a couple things that I thought were ethically problematic when I gave the examples under the fiduciary duties. But just as a reminder, be very careful on these things. Do not ever accept gifts or favors from suppliers, contractors, or community members, which may create a real or perceived conflict of interest. Also, if you're accepting bids on a large project for your community, you'll want to make sure that those bids are sealed and given to somebody who, has no, interest or financial interest in the selection of a vendor. Sometimes I worry a little bit that a lot of management companies now have expanded their services to include like sister companies to the parent management company, and maybe ABC Management Company also has ABC Landscaping and ABC Pool Service. And so you want to make sure if you're, as an association, if you're bidding out for new services, if the management company has some skin in the game with the sister company, you're going to want to make sure that that bid gets sent to somebody like your attorney or maybe even your accountant, or that they're sealed bids and that nobody opens them, so that the board is making a fair decision when you're reviewing bids to select a vendor. Another really important thing, ethical issue is, don't ever misreport, withhold, or fail to fully disclose important information about association operations or finances. I'm going to give you a really good example about this in a few minutes when we talk about fraud and embezzlement in an association, because unfortunately my association was faced with that challenge, and we had some issues as a board as to whether or not we should tell the homeowners what was going on. And I'll tell you that good story at the end of this presentation when we talk about fraud and embezzlement. So you shouldn't be withholding anything from your owners. Transparency is of utmost importance. Now, If your attorney is saying, hey, this is confidential because there's a lawsuit pending, then you don't disclose that. But when there's something serious that affects your association and it affects, the association as a whole and individually homeowners that will affect them too, it's important to, let owners know through the open board meetings what's going on and how we're addressing the issue. Another thing that's important is making decisions with transparency and adequate communication with the owners. So make sure that you're noticing your regular board meetings 48 hours in advance of the meeting, and you're having a detailed agenda 48 hours in advance of the meeting that's sent to the owners or posted on the common areas or put on your website that describes, with reasonable particularity what it is you're going to be discussing. So if people want to come to the meeting, they can attend after looking at the agenda and the notice. And the boards, I will tell you in my experience, the boards that try to hide things and that aren't transparent, guess what? They have the largest problems. They have the largest number of problems. They have the most need for legal services. They get involved in the most legal entanglements. So don't be that board. Be the board that is doing things in open board meetings, not outside meetings by emailing and making decisions, outside of an open board meeting by email, absent an, emergency circumstance, which you would be allowed to do that, because the statute does allow for emergency meetings without the 48 hours notice. But generally speaking, like 98% of your business as a board is open meeting stuff. And so do it in the open meeting and make sure that you're giving enough information, the agenda and the notice of the meeting, that if people want to attend, they can attend and listen. And pump up your communication to your owners. If people are complaining that you're not being transparent, owners are complaining, that's, a good reality check for your board that, hey, we need to communicate better because we are transparent and we're just not getting the word out well enough so that you know what's going on. Board member conduct is also subject to ethical scrutiny. So any behavior that undermines professional or respectful environment is not appropriate for board members to engage in. So in threatening, intimidating, or harassing homeowners, other board members, association employees, association vendors as a board member is a big no-no. Don't be using your board position to exert personal influence or pressure, in any way. Your whole role of being on the board is to serve. You are a servant leader for your community. And part of that service is putting community ahead of yourself. And so, sometimes we do see, people that get on the board and it becomes a problem that, they're trying to, exert influence or power as part of their service on the board. And remember, this is servant leadership. This is serving to help and not serving to get power. Also, be really careful on engaging in unprofessional or disrespectful communication with anyone. Stay off of Facebook and Instagram, and any comment that you make as a board member is perceived as the board's position. So be really careful how you're communicating with members and how you're communicating with vendors, and be respectful in all of your communications with, any third party you have as a board member. Okay, let's talk a little bit about a code of conduct. I don't usually whip this out unless there are pretty serious problems and a high level of dysfunction on a board. But we have a form, and we're going to be sharing with you on our Zoom and on Facebook Live our cheat sheet on a board code of conduct. And basically what this is it just outlines, it's a 1 or 2 page document that we bring to the board and we say, hey, you're having a lot of issues right now. And we think that having the board members read this and consider it and agree to sign this would be a step in the direction of, making sure that people are living up to their fiduciary duties if they're serving on the board, and being respectful to each other and being respectful to homeowners. And it just covers a number of different things. And we're giving you a sample one for free. But we can tweak it any way you want us to. And if Sometimes communities have a special issue that they want us to add to it. So it's a document that is, able to be altered to, address any situations your association has. It's a great thing to consider if you're having a high level of dysfunction, your board's not getting along, or you have one or two or more board members that are just not living up to their fiduciary responsibilities to the association. Now, a question that I get often on the code of conduct is, usually what I hear is that all the board members that are following their fiduciary responsibilities and that are following the law and following the documents, they agree to sign the code of conduct. And then maybe one or two problem board members refuse. I'm not signing that. And so the way to work around that is, remember, all decisions on your board are made by a majority vote. So just have a motion for your board to follow the code of conduct, all board members to follow the code of conduct, a second, and then it should carry by a majority vote. And then now the code of conduct is in place for your board. So that's a good suggestion to get over that hurdle if you're having that problem. Again, remember, if you have any board members that are really not living up to their fiduciary duties to the association, something to consider would be to have a boot camp where I come in and I meet with the board and we talk about the problems and we try to find some common ground. And I try to listen and give suggestions and learn more about the different personalities in the room to see how all of us, the board members, can work together and resolve issues. So I encourage you, if you're having problems, take a look at our cheat sheet that we're sharing with you on the code of conduct and consider maybe adopting that or a form of that for your association. Let's see. A few other examples of things that we're going to be talking about today would be like how to report and address when you see unethical behavior. So oftentimes there's like a rumor mill in an association and, people think somebody might be getting a kickback, or they might be having the vendor come to their house to trim the tree and they think they're getting it done for free. So how do you handle that if you think there's an ethical violation, but you're not quite sure, you don't really have the evidence? So I think it's important to have good communication when you get into those situations and not to immediately go negative and think the worst in every situation. And so typically what I've seen boards that has been how it's handled when we think there's been an ethical violation. Now it depends on the seriousness of the violation. Sometimes it can just be addressed informally where, you ask or you give a reminder like, hey, remember that while we're serving on the board, we can't be asking the association's landscaper to come over and do free work on our property. Right. Or maybe if it's suspected and it's more serious unethical behavior, maybe the board needs to conduct a thorough and impartial investigation. Maybe they need to bring in a third party to do that. Maybe they need to consult with the lawyer for the association and get their opinion on what's going on. If it's a large issue, you're going to want to gather facts and documentation. You're going to want to be fair because even if somebody's being accused of something, they have a right to due process, and we need to listen to their side as well as look at the facts and the evidence. And then you may want to have the matter evaluated by a third party who is objective before taking any action. Maybe it's going to be your association's legal counsel, or maybe it's the management company that's going to weigh in on something. So, this is kind of how you need to address things that come up that might be considered unethical or accusations of unethical behavior. If you do find after investigating that, hey, there's cause here, this is like an unethical situation, how do we implement appropriate corrective measures? So maybe if somebody came over, a landscaper came over and did work for free at the board member's property, we should ask the landscaper how much would that have cost, and then the board member should pay the landscaper for that. That would be one example. If it's something that can't correct it in that manner, maybe we need to issue a formal warning, or maybe a written reprimand, or maybe the attorney needs to write a letter to the board member to, reiterate why this is a problem and to cease and desist from doing it in the future. Maybe the board member needs to be removed if it's a serious infraction. And there's a whole removal process under Arizona law that you would need to follow. You don't look at what your bylaws say, you look at exactly what the Condo Act or the Planned Communities Act says about the removal process. We have a cheat sheet on removing directors from office. It's on our top 10 things you need to know about Arizona Community Association law. And I think it is number 6 on that top 10 list. Okay, so we've kind of covered a lot of ground today, talking about fiduciary duty, ethical landmines, how we handle ethical landmines. Now I'd like to switch gears and talk really for like the last 10 or 12 minutes about preventing fraud and embezzlement in your association. So this is like a really scary topic. Usually when I teach this class, and this is the only topic, I don't get a high turnout because it's scary and people don't want to think about it. If you're serving on your board, you don't really want to ever think that somebody's stealing money, or maybe that the management company is misappropriating funds. So the purpose of adding it to the class today is to give you tools in your toolbox so that you know the warning signs and you know what to do if you see the warning signs. And also, we're going to give you some tips on how to prevent it in general by actions your board can take. So I think if you go and Google HOA or condo in Arizona and embezzlement or theft of funds, or, manager embezzles from association board, you're going to be shocked if you see how many things pop up on your Google search. It's prevalent, it's there, and it's something that we as communities, we really need to think about. Hey, this isn't just like a one-off, a 1 in 100. This is happening frequently in associations. And we need to be vigilant on this so it doesn't happen to our association. So what are some things that an association can do? One thing I'm going to mention is I did a lot of research on this earlier in my career. I created a cheat sheet for associations that we represent, mainly because I saw in 30 years, I've seen a lot of different things. And I've seen situations where management companies have taken money from associations, board members have stolen money or embezzled money or misappropriated petty cash. I've seen many examples of it over the years. So I wrote the cheat sheet as the lawyer advising associations on how to manage it if it happens to you, and what are some things you can do to prevent it. What I didn't anticipate is that when I became a board member in my community, that I was going to be dealing with this firsthand as a board member. So I'm just going to give you a quick little story that hopefully will help you, understand how prevalent this is. So I served on my board, before I had children. I had my son in 2006 and my daughter in 2007. And once I had my children, I was very busy, with work and a lot of night meetings and managing and balancing a family. So I then stepped off my board for a decade. And at the end of that decade of, not being on the board anymore, I started to notice that things were really going downhill at our association. Like the maintenance was going downhill. Our reserve accounts was like very depleted based upon the information that I would look at the annual meeting each year. And I just sensed that something wasn't right because we had no money and everything looked horrible. And it just seemed like nobody was watching things. So I became a gadfly. So for those of you who are listening today who are gadflies in your community, know that at one point I was a gadfly. What is a gadfly? A gadfly is somebody who's unhappy with what's going on with the association and your board. So I was the worst gadfly there can ever be. A former board member who's now wants to give advice and feel the association isn't being run correctly. So I'm the worst gadfly possible. So I started to ask some questions, about different things. I was really upset about one issue. And I felt like the board wasn't dialed in on it. And then I was worried about the money that, the finances had been so depleted. Like we lost, basically 80% of our reserve had been depleted. And I didn't really see anything that was done to spend the money. And so I started asking questions. Again, I'm still an owner. And I'm getting kind of making records requests now, and I'm just not getting the information that I need. That I think I, deserve, like meeting minutes and copies of insurance policies and other things. So one day I hear that the manager quit. And the next thing I know is that the manager, or that the treasurer also was having a health issue, and the treasurer decided to leave the board. And so the board hired an interim manager, and they sent out an email to our community. Hey, we're looking for somebody to be the treasurer. Anybody interested, let us know. So of course, I'm the only person that volunteered. And so, just getting to this story, this is uncovering fraud. So my first, week as the treasurer for the association, the interim manager calls me in a panic and says, I'm getting notices that the water and the electricity are being turned off at our association, and I don't know what to do. And I'm like, what? I'm like new to the board. Like, what do you mean? Like, why? She's like, well, the bills haven't been paid for 2 months. And on the third month, now they just cut service. So I went to her office and we figured it out. We were moving around money. And, that was my first warning sign. Whoa, something's not right here. Like, this is a very nice community. Like, this should not be happening. The second thing that I had that was a notice was the interim manager called me and asked me to stop by after work and look at something that came in the mail that she was concerned about. So didn't give me a lot of feedback. So I get there and I look at it, and it's a bank account that nobody knew about for our association. And it was called the Employee Holiday Fund. That isn't foreshadowing. I don't know what is. So I said, I don't know anything about this account. It's not on the 2 accounts that I have as treasurer, that I'm looking at. So I'll go to the bank and find out what's going on in it. So let me fast forward here a little bit. I go to the bank. I ask for a year of records. I look through the records and determine, oh my gosh, like, this is really bad. Like, this manager was using this bank account as her personal slush fund. And she bought a BMW. She was taking trips to Hawaii. She was depositing owner checks into this account and then just using the money as like an ATM for her. And it was very, very scary for me as a board member, but also as an attorney, because I'm like, I'm involved in this, right? And now I've got to fix it or, manage it. And so, one of the things I talked about at the beginning of this class was, disclosing when there's a problem, right? So let's back up a little here. Remember, I was the gadfly. So everybody who was on the board, they didn't like me, right? Because I was asking questions and I was complaining about the landscaping looking bad and why is the tennis court closed and, all these different things. And so I go back to the board with my findings immediately. I ask for a meeting and I have all my highlighters with all the bank statements. And I say, I only have 1 year. I'm going to go back to the bank and they'll let me go back 6 more years. So we'll get 7 years total. But what I'm finding here, like, we need to get our attorney for the association involved, and we need to deal with our insurance company. We need to, this is serious. Like, this is probably like a call the police type issue. And the board at the time asked me to leave the room, and they wanted to discuss it without me. And so I left and waited, and about 20 minutes passed, and then I came back, and they all left, and they left a piece of paper on the table that said, we all resign. And so now I'm the only member of the board dealing with this problem. So, basically, let's fast forward. It took us, that was in 2016. I think we were down to our last $200,000 for our association. We should have had $4 million. And now let's fast forward to, now where we actually have about $5 million in our account, and we're doing a large capital improvement project. And we made an insurance claim for the fraud. We went to the police. The manager, unfortunately, only served 18 months in jail, but we did put her in jail. And, we rebuilt the community with a new board. That was actually kind of a dream team. It was actually really good luck that everybody quit, because And we were able to find really good people to serve on our board. We got a CPA, I'm a lawyer. We have a business owner, we have an interior designer, and then we have somebody that's really good on landscaping. And so that board had to work together to solve the problems. But the warning signs were there on the fraud. Okay, like the community was falling apart. The landscaping was looking horrible. I asked for the insurance policy. Nobody could give me a copy of it. I'm looking at the financial statement. Like, we're supposed to have this much money in our reserve according to the reserve study, and we're funded at like 8%, when we really should be somewhere between 60 and 80%. So the story here is, look at our cheat sheet on how to, manage and avoid fraud and embezzlement, but also recognize that when this happened, we had to have a meeting of our homeowners. And yes, this was a very hard meeting to conduct because I didn't make the mess, but I was trying to help clean it up with my fellow board members. And really surprisingly, everybody was very nice. We went into the meeting, we told them what happened, we gave them full transparency, we didn't blame anybody. We just said, this is what it is, and this is how we're going to fix it. And here's, our plan to get the money back. And we got back pretty much, I think we were able to prove she took over $500,000. And we got probably 80% of it back through insurance claims and going after the bank. And the rest is a full restitution order against the manager in case she ever gets a job again. We can, get restitution from her wages if she ever works again and is working on the books. So this happens. This even happened in my association, is my point. So, what are some examples of what misappropriation of funds looks like? So it could be a manager or board member taking cash, faked expenses, paying non-existent employees or former employees on the payroll, transferring association funds to another account or to another community, which is what happened in my association. Use of association funds as collateral on a personal loan. Seen that with a manager. It's crazy. Showing investments on a financial statement that don't exist. Like, we have a CD with, Ameritrade, and, that's not existing. Or a manager paying personal bills with association funds. Like our manager for my association, my former manager that, was paying for a leased BMW using association funds every month. Okay, so that's what it may look like. Now let's talk about what are some warning signs that you need to be watching for as a board member. Not getting bank statements as part of your board packet. That's very important that you look at that bank statement every month. Having a full reconciliation and general ledgers, financial statements every month, even if you're not meeting in the summer months, right? December, when it might be too busy with the holidays, you still get the financial part of your board packet. Missing or altered documents, like, we can't find that, or, you notice that you think the numbers were changed on something. Unexplained cash shortages, unexplained, we got to pay this bill today, the insurance is due today and we need to pay it today. Emergency type payments like that should be a warning sign that, hey, something's not right here. Increased past due amounts. So, as an example from my association, duplicate payments to vendors is very common, and then they wash the check. Unexplained overdraft or other bank charges. When I was going through the bank accounts for our association, where the manager, had that separate slush fund account, she was overdrawing the other account all the time. I mean, it was crazy. It was like $2,000 in overdraft fees between the two accounts that were on the books that we had. That should have been a warning sign, even for the bank, that, hey, wait, something's not right here. But definitely for the board. And if you are getting your bank statement, you'll see those fees adding up every month. Unauthorized purchase transactions, maybe they're charging things on a credit card for the association. I really don't like having a credit card for the association, by the way. I just think it's too tempting and not a good idea. But then they make unauthorized purchases. They're at Home Depot and it looks legit, but actually they're buying, a new vacuum for their house or something. And then payments, just rando payments for unspecified services. Like, we don't even know who this person is. One other thing on my association that our manager had done was she had set up she created a fake CPA to give the association's board a fake audit. So wow, that's like way over the top. But, so making sure that the audit is done by the person, that is known in our industry, whatever area of town you live in, there's different CPAs that, specialize in doing audits, reviews, and compilations for HOAs and condominiums, and making sure that you're the contact person as a board with the CPA for the audit and not the manager, because you want to make sure that we're insulating, because that potentially could be somebody who's stealing from the association or vice versa. A couple things that I would recommend that you do is first review your association's insurance coverage now, because you want to have adequate insurance in the event that you do have something bad like this happen where somebody's stealing money. It's important that you have, directors and officers insurance, a fidelity bond. We were really lucky in my association. Normally fidelity bonds are only like $50,000. Our association, I have no idea how this happened, but it was $1 million fidelity bond, which was very helpful as we were trying to recover the money. The policy should cover anyone who has access to the funds. So board members, management company representatives, and meet with your insurance agent to talk about, okay, what type of policy do we have to protect us in the event that there is fraud or embezzlement in our association, and make sure that you have adequate insurance in that event. Okay, I'm going to leave you with 11 tips that you should be thinking about as a board, so that you're taking control of your finances and making sure that you're not allowing fraud or embezzlement to occur in your association. So here are some financial controls and accounting practices that we recommend your association consider to avoid fraud or embezzlement of your association's funds. So number one, keep your records up to date, right? Don't fall behind on financial statements, year-to-date budgets. This is something that needs to be done like clockwork every month. If your management company is 2 or 3 months behind, that's a warning sign. Don't allow that. The reserve funds, number 2, are probably where you have the reserve account is probably where you have a majority of your funds, right? Your long-term capital improvement fund. And if you have a lot of money, in your reserve account, make sure that there's only one person. It's not just one person that has access to that, can transfer money in and out. It should be the entire board. There should be no electronic transfers allowed for that large number reserve account for your association. Monthly financial reports should be prepared and made available for board review every month. And that includes a balance sheet, statement of revenue and expenses, and a budget comparison, year-to-date budget comparison. Number 4, this one's controversial. I usually get a lot of pushback from management companies when I say this, but I'm going to say it anyways. Think about requiring 2 signatures of board members on all checks or transfers that are over a designated amount. So maybe you say to the management company, okay, you can sign checks that are all of our regular bills and any checks up to $2,500. Anything over $2,500 is going to need to be signed by the board. Same thing, any reserve transfers would need to be signed by at least 2 board members, and the full board majority of the board would need to approve that reserve expenditure. Another thing, when you're reviewing checks, I've been treasurer for my association and I've been a director at large for my association. The treasurer, really high scrutiny should be given by you when you're signing checks. So when I was a treasurer, what I was doing is I was looking at the bill, making sure it wasn't past due, making sure it was for our association, and then looking at the check, make sure the numbers matched, and then sign the check. And I knew generally, I knew our vendors for our association. I knew how many times a month we get a bill from the vendors in our association. So there was not likely that someone could slip in an extra APS bill and I wouldn't catch it. So, being aware as the treasurer of how things operate and not just signing checks blindly. Never sign a blank check for an association. Never, ever sign a blank check for an association. That is a very bad idea. But then also when you're signing checks for bills, make sure that you're doing the due diligence to make sure it's, the right bill and that you're, not paying a duplicate bill. Review your bank statements and reconciliations every month. Review delinquent receivable balances. So if you've got owners that are paying assessments, keep an eye on that. Don't let those get too high. Make sure that the association's taking action on those accounts. It could be a warning sign that the manager has transferred the money to a different account and claiming that this person is delinquent when really they're not. They've been paying, but the manager was depositing the money in another account. Make sure that you have adequate insurance. We talked a little bit about this with the fidelity bond, to cover any potential losses that might, come about through fraud and investment. Also, you want to have directors and officers insurance in the event the board is accused of financial mismanagement. Every year in Arizona, you're required to have an audit, review, or compilation done of your association's books and financial books and records. You're not required to have it done by a CPA unless your documents require that. But it's a good idea. So if your association has enough funds to have an audit done by a CPA, we really do recommend that you do that. Otherwise, have a review or audit done by an independent third party to meet the requirements of Arizona law. And last thing, number 11, this is a good kind of closing remark on the fraud and embezzlement issue. If you discover or you think that there's, a possibility that there's fraud and embezzlement in your association or that money's missing, reach out to your trusted advisors and talk about it. So your attorney should always be somebody who's independent and who's not closely aligned with the management company. And so if you contact me, you have my guarantee 100%, whatever you say to me is confidential, and that I will not go tell the management company. What I will do is I will listen and I will strategize with you about, yes, I think this is problematic, and yes, I think this is what we should do, or I'm not sure that you have enough evidence to accuse this person. We need to do a little more research or whatever. Or this is our pivot. And now, having been through this, not only with clients in the past, almost 30 years, and then unfortunately having been through it with my association, I feel that I am very dialed in on what you need to do if this unfortunate situation is presented to your board. And one of the first things you want to do is remove the perpetrator from the position of control, and stop bank activity by that person. You need to be thinking about notifying your insurance carrier and, strategizing with your independent legal counsel on how to best manage this really horrible and difficult situation. So hopefully I've given you some tips today so that you will never be in that situation with your association. I know it's kind of scary to talk about it, but just being here today and listening and hopefully implementing some of these suggestions will help your association so that you're never in this position. Okay, today, great turnout today. We had 147 viewers at peak time during our presentation today. So really wonderful that we had such a great turnout. And we had more, of course, joining us on Facebook Live too. There are a couple different opportunities coming up in the very near future regarding classes that we're teaching. So we have 3 classes in May that we want to make you aware of. 2, or actually all 3 of them are virtual. Live HOA Condo Academy number 5 on Tuesday, May 19th at 11 a.m. And our topic is going to be one of my favorite topics to teach, which is secrets of successful associations. What are some tips on how to be successful as an association and as a board? And then what are 10 things that every board member needs to know about running the association and the laws that pertain to associations. And then last but not least, we're doing a special seminar, online virtual seminar for the city of Surprise. Anyone's welcome to attend, though, just so you know. It could be Surprise residents or not Surprise residents. This one's going to be an evening class, and I'm going to be teaching it on Wednesday, May 20th, from 6 to 8 p.m. It's going to be a virtual class on Zoom. And we're going to talk about HOA and condo enforcement. Like, what do you do when owners aren't paying their assessments? What do you do when there's violations on the owner's property or they're not following the CCNRs? What are our legal remedies? What can we do to get them to be in compliance? And that information is going to be posted very shortly on our website. And so anytime you're looking for classes that we're teaching, the go-to place is mulcahylawfirm.com. We typically have all the classes listed, and we also have how to register for the classes. Some of you who are frequent flyers have been asking me, when are the classes for June through December are going to be posted. We are going to be posting those very soon, probably this week or early next week. So stay tuned. We've got a great curriculum of classes for the second half of 2016 coming your way soon. And again, it'll all be posted on our website. So I hope everybody has a great day today. Hope to see you at one of our 3 virtual classes in May. Take care, everybody, and thank you for serving on your board. Bye.